So good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Peterman, and this is the Steps to a Modern IT Infrastructure. This is a webinar that we're giving you guys to show you and go over some of the points about the end of life of 2003 and some other bits and pieces that we work with. Today's webinar is presented by myself, Ben Peterman, the Client Solutions Manager at IV4, and Todd Sweetster, the Partner Technical Strategist at Microsoft. Say hello, Todd.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, as always. Just before we kick into the main event, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview about IV4. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, a Rochester Top 100, Cisco Premier Partner, CRN Next Gen. These are wonderful little badges that we have here. But we also sell and partner with quite a few other partners out there. So Microsoft is probably our main partner we go with. Cisco, VMware, HP, EMC and Barracuda are just a few that we work with. IV4 has a selected of practice areas that we've decided to go ahead and specialize in, and those around here are infrastructure, virtualization and cloud. These things include Office 365, hosting of your backups on-site and off-site, disaster recovery services, and it's our goal is to help you guys manage your move to the cloud and maximize the benefits of this virtual technology that's out there, and effectively just boost the net worth of your IT infrastructure and make you guys work smarter. Data management, so managing your dynamic assets, the stability to your environment, data security and integrity. These are all the things that we cover around this stuff to make sure that people can only see the information they're supposed to see, which is really important, and assist you guys in stopping leaks from going outside of your organization. And then of course we have our business collaboration and technology practice area. So we're talking unified communication, Microsoft and products like Office 365 with SharePoint Exchange, which we'll cover a little bit later on. We have governance, security and compliance. This is somewhere that seems to be getting much more attention these days, especially with viruses and people getting hacked all the time, like Target and Home Depot and places like that. So we have a whole compliance architecture that we've been developing to assist you guys with HIPAA, PCI, FERPA compliance, and again, all this stuff comes into business continuity, disaster recovery and planning and testing, which is probably some of the most key things that we can do right there. Mobility and end user experience. This is one area that I spend a lot of my time making sure that from the desktop point of view, the people in your organization have, the information they need when they need it, email, databases and things like that. And of course, with all the bring your own devices and other things that you have in your mobile phones, iOS, Windows, Android devices, people can access the data when they need it. And this is one of the areas that we come into it. And we assist you in making sure that, again, your data is protected and secure within those devices. And if anything happens, you can take that data and make sure that people can't get their hands on it. The last part of our practice areas here is our network management. We do manage services, so we can come in and actually just take care of all of your equipment with our Integrity Pro monitoring and managed services. Our IV4 site security and audit services and net health checks, just to make sure that your business is up and running and working efficiently. So I'll spend just a real small amount of time on this slide here, but this is some of the changes that we've made to our organization over the years. Many years ago when I first joined, it was about, you need a new server, we come in, we put a server in, off we go, and that's it, we're done, and you kind of just take care of it from there. But these days it's a little bit different. Our IV4 site methodology, as we've got it, starts with the business. So we sit down with you and we talk about your solutions, what you want to do. We try to understand your business. Then we assess your current assets and the things that you're using right now. And then we move that over into an architect to come up with a design and a plan that's going to be much more beneficial to you and your organization. We then lay down the plans, we draw, we put the milestones in, we have project management, and then we deploy it. get it out to your organization with as minimum amount of fuss as we can, and then we assist you going forward in maintaining it. And you can see that a lot of the studies show that 16% of projects are completed on time and on budget, which means there's an awful lot that aren't. 53 go over, and 31 are not even completed. I mean, coming from the UK as I do, there was a big computer system that was supposed to be rolled out for the National Health Service, and they spent billions, and nothing happened. It was a complete waste of money. So our goal is to stop that from happening, to make sure you have the right goals, the right milestones in place, and we assess it as we move forward. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Todd.
Thank you very much, Ben. And again, thanks everybody for being here this morning. My name, as Ben mentioned, Todd Sweetser. I'm a partner technology strategist here with Microsoft. I work with Microsoft partners to help ensure that they have what they need to be successful, more on the pre-sales technical side. And today I was invited to come in and talk about Windows Server, and talk also touch on some other aspects of solutions that can help replace potential Windows Server implementation, be it either on premises with an updated Windows Server or in the cloud with a variety of services that Microsoft now offers. And kind of just starting things off, kind of kicking it off is the driver for a lot of this. It's the end of support for Windows Server 2003, 2003 R2. 2003 actually ended mainstream support back in July of 2010. So it's been on extended support since then. At this point, it's going to be coming to a full-blown end of support, and that date is July 14th of this year, which is coming up right quick. 69 days remaining on the countdown ticker there. And you'll see there's some optimistic estimates listed there about how long it could potentially take for migration, and we're already well below a lot of those optimistic estimates. Although many times those estimates are sometimes very enterprise focused, and in the small and medium business space, many times it can be done in a more efficient manner. But it's still important. It does take time because you need to actually sit down and look, and we'll talk about some of the things we need to look out for and some of the options going forward. So really, what does end of support mean? What does it bring to the table? What are the drivers for going to the next steps? First off, there's no updates, right? So with Windows Server 2003 R2, there will be no further updates, and that's security updates, and that's what's been released basically since Windows Server 2003 has been outside of mainstream support. Has been primarily security updates still being available. And even into 2013, there were 37 of them released. So there continued to be many updates released for the platform to help ensure security within that platform. But those are going to be no longer. Another thing to be aware of is compliance, because when there's no updates in this, and the operating system itself is not supported by the vendor, in this case Microsoft, you're not going to be able to pass compliance audits. The example shown here talks about PCI. So if you're in the retail industry and you require the payment card industry, that PCI compliance, Visa and MasterCard will no longer do business if they find out that you're running 2003 server. And there's HIPAA, and there's other factions to be aware of. And all of those would become a problem, because without having a supported operating system that's underlying running your business, you are going to be out of compliance, and you would not pass an audit should an audit take place. And there's obviously a risk with that. And there's no real safe haven either. It doesn't matter where it is. If it's a physical server or even if it's a virtualized server, it doesn't really matter. If it's running Small Business Server 2003, that's based on Windows Server 2003, it's still going to be impacted. There's a potential of increased operation supports or costs associated with it as well, because like I said, if you get caught by an audit, there's going to be costs there. You may have to, if you are still running it, there may be other things you're going to try and do to help facilitate and protect yourself. Those are going to cost more, and perhaps that wouldn't be necessary in moving forward with updating the operating system or moving the workload elsewhere. And then, of course, other third-party applications. Many third-party applications may be running on these systems, and they wouldn't be supported any longer either if they're running on an unsupported operating system. So these are other things to be aware of. Really, at the end of the day, this is really the time to act. You really need to start looking what's running in that environment and start planning that migration. And that's definitely what IV4 and Ben and his team is here to help with, to help you analyze that, sit down with you and understand what's going on and start planning that migration and transforming the actual data center infrastructure today. And when we say transforming, we're talking about the era of computing and how it's evolved. It really began, of course, with that PC era and the drive to have a PC on every desktop. We're definitely moved probably beyond that, in that everybody has a PC on every desktop and a PC in every bag, and a variety of mobile devices. Of course, is becoming with Microsoft a cloud-first, mobile-first world. So even mobile devices are essentially PCs in your hands a lot of the time. So the PC area is definitely evolved into the internet area, where all the servers and PCs and networks, everything gets connected, and that helped drive a lot of that application internetworking capabilities. And now we're really kind of evolving into kind of what's called the cloud era, where you're taking a combination of the PCs and the servers and the internet and the connectivity, but then having availability of large infrastructures to provide on-demand productivity and be able to set up hybrid infrastructures in a much more flexible nature than you ever were before, with very powerful tools and very powerful back ends that didn't exist 5, 6, 7 years ago. And that's how fast these things have evolved and have come forward. And now, at this point, it's definitely a potential option, which we'll talk through a little bit more. It's about the data centers actually being transformed. I mean, if you look back, 2003, it was an amazing operating system for the past 10 plus years, and it's changed a lot. The IT has changed a lot since then, and data centers are being transformed at a very rapid pace. We see, and these are just a few stats, right? 71% of companies seeing a rising demand for IT projects. But a lot of it's becoming more about utilizing some components of the cloud, if not all the components of the cloud within their infrastructures. We see 70% of CIOs are embracing that cloud-first strategy in 2016, and a large amount, almost 50% of IT services are projected to be spent on cloud services by 2020. So, I mean, all of these statistics point to the fact that customers are looking for a lot more agility. They're looking for increased ease of management and access to cloud capacity to help them handle a lot of the increased demands without potentially increasing the costs. So really it makes it this particular time a good time a good opportunity potentially to look at transforming your data center, to start taking advantage of services, in this case maybe such as Microsoft Azure, which we'll be talking about quite a bit, or moving to a hybrid cloud model. Because it provides a lot more flexibility. It provides a lot of different cloud options in an on-demand type of a manner. You can scale up and scale down quite easily. And there can be a reduced cost and potentially a reduced set of complexity. A lot of the back-end systems that traditionally have taken a lot of resources to run can now be run partially or completely within a cloud infrastructure, and a lot of the back-end services being taken care of and covered. And it allows you a lot of agility and a lot of flexibility to change and alter the landscape based on the requirements, providing that kind of rapid response to those opportunities, and be able to update and increase the scale or decrease the scale based on what's necessary. and you really create a data center. It says data center without boundaries. What does that really mean? Because you can create virtual networks that connect from a cloud environment into your local environment, back and forth, and allows you to create a lot of ability to dynamically deliver services and applications to your end users, no matter where they are. That comes back to that cloud first, mobile first. Wherever the users are, whatever kind of devices they are, they can generally access and utilize a lot of these services quite easily. Thus, the benefits outlined here: a lot of speed, a lot of resilience, costs come down, and then there's security capabilities that can come into play that we'll talk about in a few more, a little bit later during this presentation, that can come into play as well. And we're seeing cloud innovation everywhere. A lot of different aspects of IT touch cloud innovation. It can be in the area of storage, which we'll talk about. It could be area in the networking and compute. Virtualization comes into play quite a bit here. And being able to manage this across the board using management tools that many people may be familiar with, using System Center and management tools along those lines. And then identity kind of becomes an overarching part and an overarching place where, of course, authentication becomes the key, being able to know who these users are as they're coming into all of these different tools and be able to manage and control those. So we'll talk a little bit about a few of these points. Identity itself. With identity, you historically, of course, have had Active Directory. Microsoft, the Windows Server Active Directory infrastructure is a strong authentication, strong user management infrastructure. It's been around for quite some time. Many of our customers are utilizing it today. So that, of course, that comes in the on-premises, right? But now there's some more options in that Azure actually has an infrastructure, the Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which you can easily combine and utilize and take advantage of. And there's a lot of services in Azure Active Directory that enhance your on-premises Active Directory today. And when I say enhance, I'm talking about the ability to provide multi-factor authentication for your users. If you need that more hardcore type of authentication to make sure that you know who the users are, who they are, using multi-factors, using a combination of a phone or some other device that they own plus a password to ensure you know who those users are, to provide reporting to let you know when anomalous type activity is occurring. A good example is if people are signing in to multiple services at different locations within a short period of time. That just wouldn't make sense. You can generate reports based on that. User signs in once in the Northeast, in the Boston area, and then within 20 minutes, their same user ID and password is used to sign in somewhere across the pond in the UK. That just wouldn't really generally make sense, and you can get reports on that and help lock things down and help ensure that level of security. And these are just a few of the things that Azure Active Directory can bring into the picture. And there's also the flexibility of even running Active Directory infrastructures within Azure as infrastructure as a service within virtual machines, either the Active Directory itself or extending and doing a replica or doing ADFS. There's a lot more flexibility, a lot more options and choices when it comes to managing your identity with Microsoft solutions. Storage is another area that has come a long ways, both in combination with the Windows Server and the cloud. And when we start talking about storage, one of the big things with Windows Server itself is the idea of something called storage spaces, creating storage pools and being able to take advantage of and create basically a SAN-like environment at a much lower cost than a SAN, thus enabling SMBs and smaller customers and mid-sized customers to be able to take advantage of the capabilities of these types of storage infrastructures, utilizing just commodity disks. And you'll see this kind of broken out into a few different levels. You've got bronze, silver, gold. It really depends on the types of disks that you're utilizing and sorting through. But you'll note If you come down into the gold area where you've got JBOD, which is just a bunch of disks, but then a combination of those with SSDs, and be able to create a scenario where much more current and optimally accessed data that's accessed on a repetitive basis is there and available for you on those SSDs quickly, and data that's not necessarily accessed on a repetitive basis gets put more on the hard drives, but is still available on call if necessary. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a potential option called Store Simple. That's a Microsoft solution that actually is basically a self-contained SAN in a box that then backs up and utilizes Microsoft Azure on the back end to store a lot of the data. And it's, if you think about storage spaces, it's kind of storage spaces on steroids, where you've got your local implementation and your local storage of the data that you're accessing on a repetitive basis, and then things that get accessed on a less repetitive basis will actually get funneled up into the Azure environment and use Azure storage. And there's other areas that you can use Azure storage in terms of backup, in terms of disaster recovery. So Azure provides quite a few other capabilities outside of even just basic file storage for making sure that your company can have its facilities, have its infrastructure up and running in case of outages, in case of downtime, in case of a disaster, other things that Azure can be taken advantage of. You know, and when it comes to Windows Server, from a compute and virtualization standpoint, Windows Server's come quite a long ways. If you think about Windows Server 2003 and Hyper-V, back in 2003, I don't think it was even called Hyper-V. I think it was just called Windows Server Virtualization, and the amount of processors on a single piece of hardware back then on the 64-bit was 64 virtual processors. Windows Server 2012 R2 can now allow up to 320 logical processors on a piece of hardware, over 2,000 virtual processors per host. So there's a lot of flexibility, much more than generally SMBs will probably require. But know that you have the access to those same types of systems that many of the large enterprises use at a smaller scale. To be able to virtualize infrastructures, virtualize workloads, virtualize applications, with taking advantage of the hardware that you have without losing the abilities of the hardware, taking full advantage of the power of the hardware. And alongside that is network virtualization. Being able to actually create networks within that Hyper-V environment that are locked down, that are closed off from other areas of the company, other areas of to focus on those particular applications. And they actually may not just be virtualized within your local environment, but also can connect up into third-party service providers, into Microsoft Azure itself. And if you create a network up in the Azure environment and you have virtualized machines up in the Azure environment, they can talk to your on-premises virtualized machines or your on-premises machines that are running on premises themselves across the board, just like they're all one entire network. So there's been a lot of advances in how networking can be taken advantage of, a lot of flexibility, as well as compute with Windows Server 2012 R2. So when we start talking about the process, when you're talking about implementing and looking at a migration, really is broken out into, we've kind of broken out into 4 basic steps. I suppose basic might not be the right term because it could be kind of involved. But the main things that need to be aware of, you need to discover that what's going on in your environment. Catalog all the different software and workloads that are running on Windows 2003 server or outdated hardware. And after you do that and you understand what's going on in that environment, you need to actually look at that. Look at those applications, see what they're doing, see how important they are, what type of applications, how critical are they to the business, are they applications that potentially can be retired or updated, how complex are those applications, how much time and work is it going to take to actually look at those and migrate them, are there databases on the back end that need to be migrated as well? Windows or Microsoft SQL Server 2005 is going to be coming to end of life next year, so that's something else to be aware of. And how risky is it to leave that system running versus actually moving it? If there's a higher level of risk, if it's a web server or if it's a remote desktop, a terminal server that you're running and it's accessed over the internet, that's a high exposure risk, and you're going to want to actually look at moving those a little more efficiently than maybe a server that's running a much more low risk type of environment. And then you're going to target your destinations, where you're going to actually move that workload to, move those applications to, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. And then, of course, migrating and making the move. So, I mean, and these steps look like 4 basic steps, but these things are going to take time, and you need to actually investigate it and make sure you understand what's going on. And it's, of course, something that Ben and his team at IV4 are very familiar with, and they can help with that. You're going to pop up and say something there, Ben?
Yeah, this falls in directly with the slide I showed about our IV4 methodology, about engaging you, discovering, the whole process of moving that in there, following the steps all the way around to eventually you're at a point where you're no longer on this equipment.
Yep. So definitely a good time to engage. So speaking of targeting your destination, you need to really think about there's a lot more options than there ever were before when it comes to where you can move the workload. And there's reasons, both pros and cons, to move to any one of these. Of course, moving to Windows Server 2012 R2, just upgrading, getting on the more modern architecture, which will allow a lot of other capabilities that you may not have had before as well, on top of even just replacing what's running today. Like obviously there's a lot of enhancements in terms of Active Directory and other capabilities. Another option, of course, is Azure. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but utilizing our Microsoft Azure cloud environment, infrastructure, not just infrastructure, but also platform as a service and other capabilities that are up there that could potentially replicate or replace some of the workloads that are running today on an on-premises environment. Cloud OS network is kind of similar to Azure, but maybe it's a third party or working in concert with IV4 and some of their disaster recovery type of scenarios, but being able to work in that area as well. And, of course, Office 365. If you've got your standard workloads of email, Exchange, SharePoint, Lync, or what's now known as Skype for Business, all of these capabilities they can actually be offloaded into Office 365, and thus lowering the amount of requirements from a server infrastructure, but still getting that enterprise capability. So the first tool that we talk about, of course, is Windows Server 2012 R2, the current iteration of Windows Server, and it's obviously made a lot of advancements over the past 10 years. And when you look at some of these items, enterprise scale, class, and performance, Windows Server 2003 could only scale to like 64 processors and a terabyte of memory. Whereas 2012 R2, today can scale to 320 logical processors, 4 terabytes of physical memory on 64-bit machines. And then on a virtual machine, even with a virtual machine, you can have 64 processors and a terabyte of memory just running on a virtual machine underneath running Windows Server as the host. Shared Nothing Live Migration. You may ask what that's referring to with RDMA, Remote Direct Memory Access. And that's something that didn't exist with 2003. This has to do with Hyper-V, and this has to do with the ability to actually move a virtualized instance, a virtualized running server from one server to another server. And when it says shared nothing, the server, the running of the server, the storage of the data on the server, maybe using storage spaces or some other back end, moving from one storage location to another with no impact to the users that are actually accessing or the applications that are running. remote directory or remote direct memory access. That's actually referring to the ability of networking cards being able to actually move that data without having to utilize the entire stack, the entire TCP/IP stack. It's actually doing it at a much lower level, thus making it a much more efficient move just from card to card, from server to server. We talked a little bit about network virtualization. Again, something that didn't exist in 03, but being able to isolate network traffic from different applications, different business units or customers on a shared infrastructure. That all can be done now. You can do site-to-site NAT forwarding functions all with that in-the-box multi-tenant gateway. That's part of the Hyper-V networking capabilities. Low-cost, highly available file-based storage. We talked a little bit about storage spaces a moment ago, and that's, again, something that didn't exist in 2003. Being able to use the SMB 3.0 protocol, which is different than SMB, of course, small, medium business. We're talking about message blocks, but allows that low-cost commodity hardware to be able to take advantage of, and being able to store server data, even in SQL applications, VHDs and Hyper-V shares within using Windows Server as that platform. We talk about backup and recovery. 2003 definitely had some basic backup capabilities, but 2012 R2's kind of gone a long ways. A lot of tools to perform basic backup and recovery tasks, but you can actually back up and restore, full virtual machines from a Hyper-V host server. There's lots of improvements in terms of managing that, the whole backup infrastructure. You can back up volumes greater than 2 terabytes with small 4K sector sizes. And Azure can also become part of this now, being able to actually back up your servers, back up virtual machines up into the Azure environment, and Azure, using something called Microsoft Azure Backup. And that's all integrated within the Windows Server platform. Of course, hybrid applications, being able to set up hybrid applications that utilize some components maybe on premises and some of them within cloud services such as Azure, using SQL Azure or using SQL up in an Azure environment, going back and forth. So that's all fully enabled with Windows Server 2012 R2. PowerShell's been, for those that are PowerShell fanatics, there's a lot of PowerShell commandlets that exist now. I think with 03 there were maybe around 100. With 2012 R2 we're well over 3,000 commandlets. So there's a lot of capabilities, a lot of automation that can be done. Take advantage of the powerful capabilities of PowerShell 4.0. And then the last point talks about feature-rich VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, being able to actually have users access virtual desktops using a VDI tool, that mean giving you a lot more control over what the users are doing and what they can access, managing it from within the server environment, but presenting the users with a way of accessing that in a very stable, controlled environment. And it's very easy to manage, lots of wizard-based tools for setting that type of thing up. It is important to note, though, from a hardware point of view, 2012 R2 does require more powerful hardware generally than an 03 server. Some 03 servers may be 32-bit. So 2012 R2 64-bit only, so there is a potential need to replace server hardware. But it is, like mentioned before already, you can actually virtualize. So you can actually maybe consolidate what maybe you have today, having 2, 3, 4 servers, physical servers running in your environment. You can knock it down to one server and then virtualize the other workloads on servers within that server environment.
And on top of that as well, Todd,
go ahead.
If you think about, if you have Server 2003 running right now as an example, and you want to put 2012 on it, you have to think that from just from your own organization, you're putting software onto a server that's many, many years old, is outside of its warranty, may be hard to find new parts, all these sorts of things come into it. So, you're forced into it, obviously, because it won't run on the older hardware, but you should think about a good cycle in replacing hardware to make sure you have maintenance in case of a disaster. Backups are great, but it's how you recover from that and making sure that we can get parts out and things like that.
Yep, good point, Ben. I mean, all that comes into play as you're looking at moving from a 2003 server. And then another thing to be important to look at is what the roles are of those servers. We talked about the discovery process. Part of that discovery process is knowing what those servers are actually doing. A lot of times they may be doing simple file services roles. And a lot of the capabilities of 2012, we talked about SMB 3.0 being available within 2012 R2. Also being able to use branch cache. So if you've got a very distributed architecture, lots of separate offices all over the place, being able to use something called branch cache. It's in 2012. To copy content to local branch services on the local machine, so it doesn't have to jump over the WAN or jump over the networking in order to get it. Web server infrastructure, obviously IaaS has continued to be evolved and enhanced. It's used by a lot of intranet as well as internet sites. Of course, SharePoint, SQL may be using it. There's a lot of different tools that will be taking advantage of the IaaS infrastructure. AD, Active Directory is usually a big player. So, I mean, and being able to now integrate AD with Azure like we talked about, there's a lot of other enhancements there. Terminal services, which is really now called remote desktop services. You can set up to share desktops. You can go all the way to VDI we talked about. Users can share specific applications. And the nice thing, too, is clients, from a point of view, as compared to older versions of Windows Server, you know, USB sharing can now be done. You can actually copy and drop files in and out of that virtualized, that remote desktop infrastructure, copy and paste all these capabilities that are there now that were not there. So it makes it much more familiar to your users from a usability standpoint. It just feels like it's their own machine running, and they can share information between their own machine and the local machine or the virtualized machine back and forth quite easily. And, of course, application server. There may be third-party applications running on. Now, many times your server may be running one of these workloads on an individual server. Many times, probably more common in SMB, there's multiple workloads. But understanding what's going on that server before you move forward, it can be very important. So, I mean, we're going to talk about a few of the other options in a little bit more detail. Microsoft Azure, really what is it? Microsoft Azure is Microsoft's solution, cloud-based infrastructure that provides a lot of flexibility, allows you as a company to grow quite efficiently because you think about the infrastructure that Microsoft's put together. There are data centers all over the world. Well over 100 data centers and regions associated with those that allow you to actually scale out, scale down based on what the requirements are. And you can be running quite quickly with Azure. You can spin up a virtual machine in literally minutes. You can be up and running pretty quick. You can scale up and down. But the nice thing is you don't have to worry about the capital costs. You're only going to be utilizing what you're using. It's a consumption-based cost infrastructure, meaning you pay for what you use. So when things are shut down, you're not paying for them. From a storage standpoint, you're just paying for what you're actually storing versus if you buy a hard drive locally, you're paying for that entire hard drive right from the get-go, no matter what you're actually storing on it. With Azure, you're paying for just what you're utilizing. And this is just an example of some of the services up in Azure. There's, of course, the web hosting capability that's been there for quite some time, being able to run WordPress or any other kinds of site. It doesn't really matter. PHP, Ruby, these are all supported within the Azure web hosting infrastructure. IaaS, that refers to infrastructure as a service. That's really the virtual machines being able to, and that's what we see a lot of small and medium businesses taking advantage of. Being able to move some of the services that they're running on their local infrastructure and getting servers off their local infrastructure, moving them into a virtualized environment within Azure and taking advantage of the capabilities there. PaaS, Platform as a Service. Azure actually started out as a web hosting and a platform as a service infrastructure. So any applications that you develop, you can actually take advantage of the power of Azure using Visual Studio Online. A lot of other app services that exist. Actually, the Active Directory within Azure is considered a platform as a service. Multi-factor authentication is considered a platform as a service, being able to utilize those functionalities within our hosted environment. And then DaaS refers to desktop as a service. And that's where we start talking about, because you can actually run, it is fully supported to run remote desktop services, RDS, within the Azure environment. And there's also a solution within Azure called Remote App, which is a self-contained solution that allows you to actually push out applications to your end users, and Microsoft takes care of those servers on the back end within our data centers, and you don't have to worry about those at all. You just need to know what applications that you want to run up there, push those images up into our environment, and then users would actually just access a small application, which then they would just click on and start their individual application, be it an Office application, be it a line of business application, directly from the Azure infrastructure. So, I mean, really, when we talk about Azure and the cloud, it talks just extending. We've talked about this quite a bit already, being able to scale quite a bit, pay for what you use, take advantage of enterprise-level security. But the nice thing with Microsoft is you can actually choose what's right for your business. And it could be one of these, it could be all of these: a physical server on premises, virtualization using Hyper-V on premises, or in combination with other cloud service providers, or using Microsoft Azure and the cloud services. And it definitely a combination of all of these. What nice thing about hosting the apps in Azure is that the capital expense is not there. You don't need to actually spend for that infrastructure. Collaboration platform is fully supported within Azure. When I say collaboration, we could be talking about SharePoint. Of course, there is SharePoint Online. Sometimes SharePoint Online may not have all the capabilities required, and you need full-blown SharePoint. And SharePoint is fully supported within the Azure environment. SQL is fully supported. There's actually two aspects of SQL. There's Azure SQL, which is just a database running within Azure, or if you need more low-level capabilities, you can run SQL within a virtual machine within the infrastructure. Of course, business applications are fully supported within Azure. And from a security standpoint, the nice thing about it is you're getting the same level of protection that Microsoft, a lot of our large customers, many of the world's largest customers actually are taking advantage of. From an SMB point of view, what happens within and how the security works in Office 365 and Azure are things that many small businesses couldn't really put together. Being able to have isolated machines running within a very locked down environment, both from a physical standpoint and from a logical standpoint. When I say physical, the only people that are going to get access to those machines physically are remote. They're not going to be on premises within those data center environments. And the people who do have actually maintain the actual physical workstations, they don't have access to log into any of the machines. And the people that do have access to the physical, the only way they're going to get into those data centers is via many levels of security, including signing up for specific times, biometrics. There's a lot of capabilities and lots of lockdowns there. And then from a logical standpoint, that data is completely locked down. It's your data. It's not scanned for advertising. It's not used for anything else. It is your data. And when you're required to get it back, well, there's methods and mechanisms in order for you to get your data back if you were to move to another third-party service or move back to on-premises. By the way, from a security standpoint, there are trust centers. If you do a Bing search for Azure Trust Center or Office 365 Trust Center, there's a lot of details there that talk about how our security works with our cloud infrastructures. And kind of moving into Office 365, because that is obviously another option for moving some of your workloads. Office 365, many people, when they see Office 365, they think of the Office desktop client, and that is definitely part of it. But Office 365 entails quite a bit more, can entail quite a bit more than just the desktop clients. And when I say the desktop clients, we're talking about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, all the different desktop clients that are part of the Office package. But it also includes business class email, Exchange Online. And Exchange Online is the same Exchange that you would run on premises, but hosted and maintained on the back end within Microsoft by Microsoft Engineering And of course, when Microsoft developed the back-end services and the software, having Microsoft run it as well when there's issues, things get taken care of in a much more expedited basis. Document storage and file sharing is SharePoint Online. Being able to use SharePoint Online as well as OneDrive for Business for your individual users. Each user gets a terabyte of data, soon to be unlimited from a storage standpoint, but a lot of storage space to be able to store their data. Online meetings using tools such as we're using today, Skype for Business, what used to be called Link Online, very powerful meeting tool. Private social networks, talking about Yammer, another component of Office 365 to provide similar social networking capabilities that users are used to from a usability point of view, but in a lockdown, secure manner, so people can feel comfortable sharing corporate information with each other. Support is included for all administrators that access Office 365, and then of course there's a financially backed SLA, service level agreement, 3 nines across the board for these services within Office 365. So it is a subscription service. Does one nice thing from a desktop client point of view, it does keep you up to date with the latest versions. Office 2013 is the current. You can actually even access 2016 in a pre-release manner right now if you desired. And the nice thing about it too is that each individual user can implement the Office client on up to 5 workstations as part of the subscription. This is different than previous ways of licensing Office. So each user, if they have multiple workstations, and one of them or many of them can be Macs as well, because Office for Mac is included as part of that subscription. Also mobile devices. There's Office for iPad, iPhone, Androids. And these all now can be taken advantage of as part of that subscription services. And the nice thing, too, is the recent documents, all those settings will follow you across the board. And if you need access to it and you're not at your own desktop, the Office Online, what used to be called Office Web Apps, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. So if you log into your OneDrive for Business and need to open up, or your SharePoint Online site's document library, need to open up a Word document, you can open it up and you can edit it and do a lot of the editing functions within the browser itself. Is it everything you can do in the desktop client? Not necessarily, but probably a good 85% of what most people will need to do just for basic editing can be done within the web infrastructure from wherever they are, from whatever device they are, a kiosk in a library, at a cafe, and whatnot. SharePoint Online, I think we have a few slides on a few of the different workloads, a little bit more detail. SharePoint Online is a very powerful tool. It's really a platform. And this is something, again, that Ben and his team at IV4 can help with, because if they come and talk to you about what you're doing today from a workflow point of view, be it web-based or be more commonly paper-based, a lot of those things can now be automated using SharePoint and SharePoint Online. Such as workflows like expense reporting, such as PO generating. All of these can be done using SharePoint Online. It does obviously have the capabilities to just do basic even document sharing, document management. I probably shouldn't use the term basic because it's pretty powerful. You can keep long-term history of files, previous versions of the files, being able to edit and work with those documents and get notifications when documents are changed. There's calendaring capability within SharePoint Online. There's basic project management capabilities even in SharePoint Online. So there's a lot of functionality there. But again, something that having a good understanding of what your requirements are and then working with you to figure out what the best ways to utilize it going forward. And this is where IV4 can come into play. And then Skype for Business, being able to, what's used today, what formerly was known as Link and Link Online. Skype for Business, Skype for Business Online. We've had a name change, and of course there's version updates and client updates that are rolling out as we speak. And the reason for really moving to the name and the usability of Skype is because that is a well-known name, well-known infrastructure. People are familiar with it, and they'll understand Skype for Business, what it brings to the table, both from a usability point of view and from a capability point of view. And when people are comfortable with it, they'll utilize it even more heavily. And what really allows you to do, but the nice thing with Skype for Business, of course, it's secure. We're talking about a secure infrastructure versus the consumer-oriented Skype infrastructure. You can share your desktop, program, do a PowerPoint like we're doing today. Voice and video over IP is there. You can meet with up to 250 people. They might not necessarily be on Skype for Business, but anybody out there on the internet, you can host these meetings. They did just announce this week at Ignite the ability to even have auditorium type of presentations, a new capability that's going to be added coming up for even up to 10,000 people. These things can be recorded like we're doing today, actually, so you can share the recording, play it back, and of course you can control who has access to what in these meetings. There's polling capabilities, QA capabilities, a lot of other capabilities from an enterprise corporate type of requirements that don't exist in the Skype consumer-oriented solution. So actually, I guess with that, I think I, at this point, conclude my component. I'll hand it back over to Ben for a few last slides of overview of some recommendations.
Thanks a lot, Todd. So what do we recommend? There's a few levels. If you're less than 15 users, Office 365 is, I would say, key and crucial. It gives you that enterprise level of Exchange. It gives you the document size. You've got sharing, collaboration with things like OneDrive. Those are the tools that are going to empower your users to do what you need to do. Then we can utilize Azure to give you, if you need some SQL or database, things like QuickBooks, stuff like that you're currently using, we can put those up on Azure so that your users have access to them. That way you don't need to have a server and the new infrastructure in your environment. Todd did explain how feature-rich we can get with Azure and all of its components. I mean, it sounds a little overwhelming, but ultimately we're going to give you authentication services, remote terminal services, or remote app services to give you the files that you need and access to them when you need them. On top of that, we can engage with Integrity Pro, which is our managed services. So we'll take care of all your desktops. We'll make sure they're patched, up and running, taking care of viruses, and those sorts of things moving on from there, all for a fixed fee. That way it enables you to manage your environment and understand what your costs are moving forward. Office 365 is a fixed fee, monthly fee, and the same with maintaining your network can also be the same. So it just brings it down into that environment. You know how much you need to spend each month. Once you get above 15 users, you can still utilize Azure, but typically we'll put in a new 2012 server to give you your on-premise, Active Directory, printing, file storage, those sorts of things as we move forward. Again, Office 365, it appears on, I don't think I've sold an Exchange server in about a year and a half. It's all been Office 365 for email because of the capabilities that it's got, and it goes from any company from 1 to 2 users all the way up to thousands and thousands, like Coca-Cola, and even New York State has moved over to Office 365. And the same things, Azure, to give you that ability to put your servers and workloads into the cloud. If we think about, you may have an SQL server that only gets used once a week or once a month when you run reporting or billing. Well, those are perfect things to put up on Azure because we can create a server, put it up there, shut it down or turn it really down to a minimum usage. And when you're ready to do your reportings, we can crank up the server. You only get billed for what you use. It's based on a consumption kind of process there. So, and then we can shut it down again. So you spend very, very little, but have the ability to use all of that infrastructure and power. Again, coming back down to Integrity Pro, we can come out there and help you guys as well, and maintain all of your equipment and be that extra level of IT. Most companies have one IT person or a financial person or somebody in their company that's been designated IT. They only have so much ability and so much knowledge. We've got 40 plus engineers with all different ranges of abilities and accreditations and things like that. So we have a wealth of experience to be able to assist your company in moving forward. So in short, why transform the data center? Well, reduce the costs, respond more quickly to business needs, minimize downtime, not just on databases, but across everything, deliver resources faster. And as you change and your business changes, we can be agile with you and keep moving forward. So with Windows Server, Microsoft System Center, Azure, and everything else, the data center, we can simplify your infrastructure and speed delivery of services to your users or to your clients, depending on what you're doing, and you get that enterprise grade of solutions, virtualization, unified management to make your organization better. And with that, that's the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions, you can either just mention them out there or type them in there. If not, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
You're welcome.